And I was talking about our panelists for this evening. We have Professor Akumbom. Good evening, Professor, and welcome to Talk to Africans.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone.
We also have Mrs. Sam Ebale. Good evening, sir, and welcome to Talk to Africans.
Thanks, Blondine.
Right. Our third panelist for the day, Mr. Dennis Kode, will join us any moment from now. But let us move ahead with what we have to talk about today. This is actually part B of this topic, building the future of Africa through recovering its history. We started on Tuesday, and it carries a lot, especially learning about Africa's history and how it can help us, to build Africa's future. Normally, we always say that you can never have a solution to something if you don't know what you're solving. You can never, be a solve. You can never solve something without knowing the problem or without knowing what exactly you are without knowing what exactly you are solving. So my first question is for you, Mrs. Sam. What really, what really are the reasons, or why has African history been so easily forgotten these days or in the 21st century?
Thanks for the question, Blondine. Now, something maybe we need to know is that colonization and slave trade were enterprises of disorganization. Um, and I borrow this idea from Dr. Wade Nobles. Um, because sometimes we think that colonization was just people coming in, just taking our land and stuff like that, and slave trade, taking our people across the seas and enslaving them in plantations. But it was not just that. It was a systematic process of disorganization disorganization of our spiritual systems, disorganization of our political systems, disorganization of our economic systems, disorganization of our what I would call techno-scientific systems. Um, so forgetting our history is a part of this disorganization. And any society that is disorganized does not have frames of reference. You know, when you don't have frames of reference, therefore you will not know where you're coming from and where you're going. And if you don't know where you are coming from and where you are going, then you go nowhere actually, and you don't realize whether you're moving or regressing. So that has been the general situation, which has been entrenched by the current political leadership, um, which of course not only is the victim of the disorganization, but almost willingly or unwillingly decides to play the game of that disorganization. Um, at the university levels, we also see that anyone who is trying to voice him or herself about the disorganization process, he is either silenced or put aside. You cannot publish seriously when you talk about processes of disorganization. And the knowledge you produce cannot be part of the mainstream, can only be, marginalized and will not have any sort of influence at decision-making levels. So those who are decision makers, therefore, don't get inspiring knowledge for them to be able to make decisions that are in favor of their people. So the education system is not fed with the right knowledge. Our history is, our true history is then therefore put aside. Okay, increasingly we are seeing different processes in the diaspora. Talk about Temple University, talk about Howard University. Some of those universities are now trying to reverse these processes, and thanks to the pioneer works like that of Cheikh Anta Diop. So we can see that more and more some Africans are reclaiming that past, because we know that if we don't reclaim it, and that's why I like Sankofa so much, if we don't reclaim it, then we are completely lost. And slowly, I think we'll get there, not because of the mainstream, but we get there because of the what I call the critical mass. When the critical mass manages to awaken to our own history, then slowly we are going to pull out our leadership. And we see some of our pioneers, what we'll call national fathers, like Kwame Nkrumah, Nyerere, were very much aware of this. And today we have guys like Magufuli, and a little bit of how do you call the president of Rwanda now? Kagame. Some of them are aware and are trying to reverse this trend. But the dominant trend is that our history is put in the shelves. You have to make a personal effort to go to the shelves, pick it up, read for yourself, but you don't find it in the mainstream. Part of the reason is also that, as we know, one of the ways to be able to justify slave trade, colonization, was to deny that Africans have history. We know the works of guys like Hegel in the phenomenology of history. He actually says clearly that Africans don't have history. Africans are close to animals, and they needed to keep this narrative for them to be able to justify that in their wicked mind they can enslave, they can treat human beings like beasts of burden. They needed to change, to make that history look like that, to justify their own inhuman behaviors. So, Blandine, so that's what I would say about the attempt to forget and veil our history as Africans. We can say more in the course of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sam, for that contribution, for answering my next question. Well, let me continue with you before I come to Prof. You spoke about the likes of Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie. How actually important are these people, these persons, to the African history?
Blandine, could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, I said when you were talking, you spoke about the likes of Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie, and my question to you is the importance of these personalities to the African history.
Uh, well, they are very important in African history in the sense that they had a memory. And I like what Ebusi Bulaga wrote in the Crisis of the Moon too, about la mémoire vigilante, the vigilant memory. And if we keep that vigilance, I think we would not get ourselves duped. And some of those founding fathers, Haile Selassie, Nkrumah, and Nyerere, had still that vigilant memory very alive, which more and more now is fading with our current system of education. And of course, youth who pass through that system of education also develop some sort of historical amnesia. They don't remember that history. Though I would say in their own genes, something tells them that the configuration of power today in the world is unjust. And for if some of them develop a small interest in reading, then they realize that that configuration is not haphazard. It is something intended to keep Africans by all means in the lower part of the ladder. So yes, those founding fathers were very important. And when you compare them to the current crop of African leaders, it is like day and night. The current crop is just what Hussein said before we started the conversation. That current crop of of African leaders are just interested to fill their needs. Need for money, need for this, need for that. A lot of needs which are endless and are not targeted to resolve a fundamental issue of African people in the continent and in the diaspora.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Sam, for taking time to answer that question. I'm also going to ask you the question from
Please, your volume, you're having a problem with the way you're communicating. It's so. Landing, check your microphone, or is it your network?
Prof, I think it is the network. It has to be the network because it's coming. All right, it's picking back up now.
Can you start? Blantin, you were talking and nobody was getting you. Can you go back?
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes, Blantin, we can.
I'm hearing you.
Okay. So I was asking about the state began when, or how much of that is factual.
You were asking, Blantin, say that again, please.
And I was asking Prof.
That word.
Prof.
Yes, that word.
That most people have this knowledge or this understanding that the African history began during the slave era. Can you enlighten us on that statement?
That is the erroneous understanding of what history is all about. Considering the fact that, please, there's a cracking noise coming from somewhere. Okay. Like I said earlier, that's the wrong understanding of what history is all about. And you can't claim that a people that had been in existence from the very beginning of creation do not have a history. That would be very erroneous. And like some actually said, it was a trajectory which the Caucasians took in order to be able to justify their injustice, which they actually uh, meted on the black people through their idea of slavery, through their idea of colonization. He quoted somebody earlier who claimed that Africa does not have a history. The only history that is in Africa is that of the Europeans. And I remember on Tuesday when I was talking, I should remind you of the Berber warrior, Touré, who actually led an expedition to conquer Europe. He took his soldiers, that was around the 700 ADs, went into Europe and conquered España, what is called today Spain, crossed over to Europe, to France, and other parts of Europe, and sat there as the leader, which implied that he became the king to lead these people. And on sincere basis, he actually introduced civilization to the Europeans, where he taught them the common bathing that we do bathe today. He introduced it to these Europeans. Apart from that, he introduced, because those people were dirty and sickly, he introduced how to use vinegar to clean wounds and all that. All that came from a Moroccan Berber. In fact, we call them Moors, but why do they call them Moors? Because that was the name they used to describe them as blacks. But they were Moroccans, today called Morocco, but those were Berbers. You can go back to history to find about the Berbers. In the present day Morocco, that is where the Berbers were located. They were a resistant group of people. Even when the Arabians came to Africa, the Berbers actually are those who resisted them. That is just to take you back 700 to 800 years before slavery began. And the funny thing you get to understand about is that these Berbers ruled Europe for 800 years. I mean, the black people ruled Europe for 800 years. That's not 800 days. 800 years. That's enough to tell you that the Africans had a history and they introduced this history to Europe. Apart from that, if we go back to ancient times, because you can't begin the history of a people from when you took them as a slave, as your slaves. You must find out where they come from. You must find out what they were doing before you came. If you find out, you discover there was a lot of history. I cited to us that when the Europeans came, they saw the great architectural works that were located in the mainland Africa, starting from Egypt down to Zimbabwe in Southern Africa. They were perplexed. In the 18th century down to even early 19th century, some of the Europeans who saw the great city of Zimbabwe actually rejected that it was not built by black people. They denied. They said the science and technology behind the construction is too high, because to them, they had already defined a black man as somebody who is next to an animal who doesn't think. And I would like to also use their own brother. I'll always quote him, Sir Macaulay, in front of the parliament in the year 1835. You remember what he told them? He said, I have gone around that nation and I've seen that these people are very strong, with very strong moral values. And these people, they got their strength from the ancient educational system, backed by a spirituality. He cited that these people can't be defeated because their intent was to defeat. And he says, I should give a proposal. The only way to defeat these people is to first of all take away their ancient educational system. And once that is done, they will become a people malleable that we can make into what we want. We must make them to believe that anything that is coming from them is bad and all what is coming from Europe is good. So that is replacing our values, deconstructing our very base. That is what kept Africa in this position in which it is. That is the same strategy that was used by all colonizers in Africa. Today, at times, we get to blame our brothers and sisters for loving Europe more than they love Africa. That is what we were taught to hold. We were taught to believe in Europe than we believe in Africa. We were taught to hold on European values than we hold on African values. All what I'm simply trying to say, Blandine, is that that statement that African history started with Europeans present is a lie, because Europeans have practically learned from Africa to become what they are. I quoted about Imhotep. If you've ever heard of him, he was a priest, an architect, a physician, and an advisor to Pharaoh Joseph. This guy, that's I think the fourth dynasty of the pharaonic lineage, the fourth dynasty. This guy Joseph was a great king, but the truth is that people don't talk more about Joseph, they talk more about Imhotep, because Imhotep further on was looked upon as the god of medicine by the Grecians. Why did the Grecians consider an African to be the god of medicine? This man had brought and built 70 philosophies, which today are used as the 70 principles of medicine. And those 70 principles and philosophies are still applicable in today's medicine. And when he did that 2,500 years before Hippocrates, who came around the 300 BC, could actually discover these same principles when he came to Africa, came to Egypt to learn. Because most of the Grecians came and learned in Egypt. When he learned, he took these principles and went back. The principles had been in existence for more than 2,500 years before he was born. When he came, he bundled them together. And today, if you ask who is the father of modern medicine. You hear the language. Everybody, in fact, every physician, I don't know if we have a doctor amidst us here, will tell you the father of modern physics or modern medicine is Hippocrates. That is a lie. Hippocrates is not the father of medicine, neither that of the modern medicine. Hippocrates stole from Imhotep. He stole from Africa. This history, like those people who told us Africa does not have a history, they lied, because African history was carved on stones. African history was carved on back of trees so that it should remain alive forever. It can't die. It cannot be destroyed. And so it remains. It will never go anywhere. And if there was a possibility for them to actually remove these, they would have done. In order to hold on to their narrative that Africa does not have a history, when they came to Africa, they discovered the civilization that took place in Africa, starting from the Kemets precisely in Egypt. I told you last time the word Egypt is a word that the Greeks actually gave to the ancient Kemets. There was no name called Egypt. The name Egypt is a Greek, it's a European coinage to describe the Kemets. And I told you what Kemet actually means. The word Kemet came from the comprehension and understanding of what used to happen along the Nile banks. When the Nile River used to overflow, it would push along the debris, and these debris will make up the black soil that was good for farming along the Nile River. And the Egyptians, also the Kemet, got their name from that particular soil, the black soil. So they were referred to as the people who are black. So they were black soil and black people. Let me put it that way. And so when the Europeans came to Africa and saw the great and wonderful architecture displayed through the pyramids that were built, they got perplexed. And in order to go with their narrative that Africans are close to monkeys and do not have any reasoning faculty, they decided to say that these great structures were built by Europeans, that those who were occupying that piece of land were Europeans. No, they were black people. The Arabians only came to Africa to occupy the piece of land called Egypt today around the 500 ADs, 600 ADs. Let me say the 600 ADs because that was when after the death of Muhammad, the expedition, the military expedition that was organized by the Arabians to actually conquer most of the lands around to plant their religion, the crossover and to Africa and to Europe. After having done that, the Arabians settled in Africa and they have become part and parcel of us. That those who were previously occupying that piece of land are the black people who have been pushed down to occupy the other parts of Africa. You remember when you study, you go to discover that the Kushan, before we talk of the Kush, we talk of the Nubian civilization that developed long, that actually finally merged with the Egyptians before you had what we call the upper and the lower Egypt. And later on, the Kushan empire that came along that actually defeated the ancient Egyptian empire to settle to build theirs. That's why when you come down to Sudan today, you find more pyramids in Sudan than you find in Egypt. Only the difference is they are smaller pyramids as compared to that which is found in Egypt. So you discover this civilization had been in Africa. The writings, I know today they tell us that the first group of persons to discover, to create writings or to invent the art of writing were the Phoenicians. That's still a lie. That's still a lie that has been told. The Egyptians were the first to develop the writing. The hieroglyphics started with the Egyptians. And those are the things that these Caucasian guys, in their ability to struggle to demean the black man and the African people, actually took these lower rungs to make sure they paint the African man as second. And this only came after the Africans went to civilize them right in Europe. This only came after that. I said, you should remember, this started happening around the 15th centuries, where they started the art of coming to Africa to take Africans, to turn them into slaves. But Africans had been there from the year 700 up to the year 1400, actually teaching them, practically being ruled by black people. And those are some of the things we need to get to understand about Africa. Africa has an age-old history that can never be destroyed, and nothing can take it away from us. We need to understand that. That is very, very important. Africa has an age-old history. Thank you, Blanty.
Right. Thank you very much, Prof, for answering that question. You mentioned something which actually was my next reasons why the Caucasians or the Western the need to wipe away African history. Can you emphasize more on that? You started with the fact that wanted to demoralize, our mentality and make our reasons. What are the brains behind nations to erase.
I didn't get your question, Claire Blanty.
Right. I said during when you were talking, we were answering the previous question. You mentioned that one of the reasons why the Caucasians or the Western, people, Europeans decided to wipe away or do away with African history is in order to minimize the Africans. So
On the
my
look.
question actually for you was, what actually is the brain behind the need to erase the African history?
Uh, uh, One of the things I would say concerning that demeaning acts and narrative taken by Caucasians is actually to claim supremacy, want to be seen uh, supreme, and need to be looked upon as the great contributors to the advancement of humanity. And to me, I might not want to necessarily get to be looking at that weakness or that particular idea of the failure that they introduced, because that to me is not what is important. I would like to tell you that going back to look at why they did that is not important to us. We are supposed to be looking at a way to step out of that particular bondage, because sincerely speaking, Africa needs to open up. We need to look for solutions out of that particular part. And on Tuesday, I said something to each and every one of us. In order not to stay in this failure, we need to realize that history is not dead. It is true that they did everything possible to hide history. History is not dead. History is alive. History is not like they told us that history is the, what's that word they use? The history is events of the past.
Yeah, the study of past events.
A study of past events. No, that's a wrong definition of history, because if you define history as past events, it means we can't use history to advance. But if you look at our topic is talking about building the future of Africa by going back to its past. What are we going to do in the past of Africa if we actually want to build the future of Africa? You realize that the greatness of the African people is found not in the acts, not in the history, but in the philosophies that were developed. The various philosophies that were developed that guided their daily life is what makes that history what it is. And I said, if Africa needs to advance, Africa needs to rebuild that particular history. So we can make history. Africans of today needs to build a new history. They need to start a new history. But the best way to do this history, we must find out what are the principles which made our ancestors what they were in their days. What is that basic founding philosophy that kept them and gave them the capacity that they had and did what they did, established the Great Pyramids, built great Zimbabwean city, built the great Sudanese or Cushan cities, and built all that we have. Gave justice to the world, the law, gave all the beautiful things that we are today are claiming as part and parcel of our history. What were the concepts, the philosophies that embedded that? That's what we should be looking at. I think for me, that is the history we should be looking at. Those principles are alive and they cannot die. So irrespective of how long the struggle to hide those, they can't be destroyed because they were embedded in our culture. Don't forget that. They were embedded in our culture. And since these principles were embedded in our culture, we could revive them today. That's what we need to look at. And I want to cite one of those principles like I cited on Tuesday. One of the concepts that gave Africans the superior mindset that they have, which today has been destroyed by virtue of the introduction of the idea that humans evolved from animals and you and apes. In fact, we haven't made to understand. Darwin's even presented that humanity evolved from apes, from single-cell organisms developed into apes. And I asked the question, why are apes not still evolving today? because these apes were supposed to still be evolving to today. We get to understand that our ancestors understood that there was a principle, in fact, of creation. And a lot of people had told us that our ancestors were polytheists, but that's not true. From my understanding and studies, I came to understand that our ancestors were monotheists. They believed in one God, the universal God, who is the content of everything. And once they believe like that, they also believe that they as individuals are particular drops in that same great content. And they call themselves the cars that came out of the great car. So they believe that as individuals, they were cars. Cars are souls, like you call today in English. The souls. So they believed that they were cars. And these cars came from the great noon through the principle of creation. And with this understanding, with the analogy of using the ocean as the principle, or say using the ocean as the entire universal content or creator, they said they are drops of water, or say drops in that particular great ocean. And with that kind of understanding, what were they building? They were struggling to identify themselves with the creator. And they understood this principle and said that they are part and parcel of the creator, implying that if they are part and parcel of the creator, it came from God. And if they came from God, it means they are creators. And so with this understanding, they say they are gods. That's why they came with this philosophy where they say the body is the content, the body is the container of God. And they said, man, know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods. So to them, they understood that if you want to know God, you don't need to go external, you need to go internal, implying that if you want to relate with God, you need to relate with God from inside. Why am I bringing this? I'm bringing it to you to make you understand that our ancestors never believed in a God that is separate from their life and experiences. They believed that they were gods, and as gods, they need to know themselves from inside. And I know that today we have this philosophy that says that to know yourself is the greatest science. I am sure almost all of us here know that particular philosophy. It says the greatest science is to know yourself. And that is the base of our ancestors. They understood this principle. They held to this philosophy. It says, if I know myself, then I know God. And they believed that they were creators of their experiences. And as creators of their experiences, they can create whatsoever they want to see, and that whatsoever they want. And you know what? It is from these principles that they started getting into the universal consciousness to pick out ideas and establish them as experiences. And so they never separated their experiences between secularity and spirituality. It was a holistic experience. So their experiences were holistic, not separated between secular and spiritual. Today, we have created a bipolar world where there is spiritual and there's secular. And as a result of that, we have disconnected from the great car that permits us to become creators and inventors. And that is the difference between our ancestors and us today. If we are supposed to become creators, inventors, and have the ability to reinvent and re-establish great architecture and science, like our ancestors did, then we must go to the place of believing in this concept of holistic philosophy, where we do not separate spirituality from secularity. The two must become one for us to become who we are supposed to become. I dived away from your question, Blandine, because the question does not actually permit me to explain where Africans need to stand in order to become great builders. Okay. Looking at your question, the question is limiting us to the failures of the Europeans in struggling to limit us. They were limiting themselves and limiting the world from advancing in the way it was supposed to go. So I don't want to stay with their failures. I don't want to reason, enter their minds to see their errors, but I think that their main reason was simply because they wanted to stay supreme and make the black man who had introduced civilization to them to be nobody before them. So they were struggling. You know, a man who struggles to carry himself before people is a man who is suffering from inferiority complex. And so, to me, that's proof of inferiority complex. That is why they are establishing the idea of supremacy, white supremacy. I don't need to introduce black supremacy because it won't make me great. That will only make me a second. So I don't think that is important to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I want to ask this question because you spoke about not wanting to talk about the failures of the Europeans and the reason why they're coming up with the white supremacy story. We spoke about Africa ruling the world for 15,000 years. But how come, or how did it happen that the same people that were ruling the world turned out to be colonized, turned out to be enslaved? Was there something that was lacking that we need to correct today if we say we are rising as Africans once more?
Okay, looking at that question again, I want to say this to you. From the moment that different ideologies and concepts about God started entering into Africa, but before then, I want to come back to present to you one of the failures of African people. There came a time when our ancestors became so interested in conquering the world to rule it that they abandoned the basics that gave their predecessors the strengths that they had. And these ancestors of ours actually got to a place where they became interested in rulership. And as a result of that, they started getting into conquering. And in doing that, they rather lose their base. And the fight of the ancient Kemites to unite the African people did not succeed to a state because more groups were created who finally got to a place where they started. Every small group will go down to create their own tribe, and that it continues. The breakdown went further. And some of these breakdowns created, for example, I want to use the Bantus, who were likely part of the Kemites, the Bantus, which we call the Bantus, who left up there, came down, spread from within Cameroon and Nigeria to the other parts of the world. you discover that we have Bantus in the south, we have Bantus in Central Africa, in West Africa, Bantus in East Africa. But the Bantus have several different tribes. Why? Because little groups of persons became interested in rulership than in consolidating the philosophies that made them and that limited who they are. And it is surprising that they used to teach about the Ubuntu philosophy, but they were living contrary to it, because instead of uniting, they were breaking up. And because they were breaking up into small little tribes around, they didn't have the capacity anymore to face the invaders. So when the invaders came, they made little tribes, and it was easy for them to conquer them. So that is where our ancestors failed. They got to a place where they started becoming power mongering and separated themselves. We are sometimes today blaming the Caucasians for coming to Africa in around when they in Berlin in 1884, 1885, divided Africa into beads of countries. We are blaming them, but we are failing to understand that our ancestors did that to themselves. Because if these tribes came together, they would have created a giant nation. But they did not. And when the Europeans came, they met good in great kingdoms, but these great kingdoms, they also met little tribes. And most of the kings of these great kingdoms were going to the little tribes and selling slaves to the white people. And so we want to blame the whites for enslaving us. We also need to blame our ancestors for selling some of the people into slavery. And so those are some of the things that cause these failure that we experience. Civilizations do rise and fall. Don't forget that. So the Africans rose at a particular period of time and their civilization fell. And it was a time for others to come in. And they had done theirs. But I believe that wheresoever something begins, it also needs to come back to where it started. And so since we started it, we can correct all the errors that have been done across thousands of years to make the difference that we need to make. So if Africa needs to learn, it needs to learn from these failures that I just cited. And not only that, we need to build the true concept and philosophies of our ancestors about spirituality. Because I see a lot of us fight a lot today about spirituality. If you just hear talk about African spirituality, a lot of people don't even know what African spirituality is all about. Not at all, they don't. Because in their minds, African spirituality has to do with the ritual acts that our ancestors were doing. They called them idol worship. No, that's not what African spirituality is all about. It is the holistic nature of living where we do not separate the spirit world from the physical. It is that spiritual dimension, that it is that life where we do not separate our experiences between spiritual and secular. That is what it is all about. And that is what we need to go back to learn in order to become who we are supposed to become. Thank you, Blanzy.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that. You spoke about, I'm going to ask this question now to Mr. Sam. Prof, in his answer, he mentioned the rise and fall of civilization, the rise and fall of different nations. But why has the rise, or why has the fall of Africa taken so long, because other nations and civilizations have risen and have fallen and have risen back, but Africa rose at some point and fell, and
Uh, I'm
it's
not.
still falling.
Okay, Blandi. I hope I got you right. So you are asking why is the fall of Africa taking this long? Actually, if you follow Professor's argument, the fall of Africa is not long. uh, it is just some 400 years ago. And strictly speaking, there is no other civilization on earth which has lasted as long as the African civilization. And we are not just talking about 15,000 years. We are talking about more than 35,000 years of civilization. There is no other civilization on this earth which has lasted that long. That said, our ancestors also knew that because of their worldview, they knew that everything is cyclic. You are born, you grow up, and you die, and it is like that. So, of course, that is in the sphere of the phenomenon where you rise, you grow, and you die. That is just a drop in the ocean. You know, when a drop gets out of what water gets out of the ocean, we call it a drop. But when it goes back, it becomes ocean. So in our ancestors' worldview, our being here in the phenomenal world is like a drop leaping out of the ocean. You know, we are leaping. But in actual fact, that leap is still being within the spectrum of the whole. You know, it is not one single and isolated leap. That was our worldview. So our civilization lasted, and because it was anchored in truth, it was anchored in justice, it was anchored in fairness, and it lasted that long. But as we know, also human values fluctuate. For instance, if you are in your city and something becomes marketable, let's say that in your city, what becomes marketable is now Bitcoins. Let's put it like that. So everyone who has Bitcoins become the king or the queen, the king maker or the queen maker. So that becomes now what makes something or people great. And at some point, the Bitcoin will also drop and something will come up. So that's how values determine the importance or less importance of civilization. And our civilization lasted more than 25,000 years because those values were actually strong values that were cherished by all people of goodwill, all people of good reason and good reasoning. But now when some other values came in, then like today we talk about materialism. We talk about the things that we can see, things that are palpable. We talk about so-called facts, you know. That's the civilization of today is the civilization of what can be seen, what can be more or less demonstrated. And it's a very feeble and poor civilization, because we know our ancestors taught us that, in fact, what can be seen is infinitesimal small than what cannot be seen. And that's the truth. The air, we feel the air, but we cannot see it. But we know that without that air, we cannot survive. And that's just the truth. And many things like that. Quantum physics has shown us that there are many more things and implications of elements and energy in the world that makes us move, live, breathe, and we cannot see them. But it does not mean that they are not there. So it's a poor civilization, unfortunately, that has taken off. Those people came to learn from us when they were still barbaric, when they were still in war, and we hosted them. We hosted them from the times of the Persians, that is 1,000 years BC. We hosted them, and then came the Greek, 500 years BC, and we hosted them and we taught them. They learned it was in our schools. After that came the Romans, 100 years BC, and we taught them, and they learned from us. But we have to acknowledge that they came from a very barbaric sort of culture. We know the history of the Celtic and the Vikings, and we know that thousands of years, I mean hundreds of years, because they are very new species in the world, and we know that the species started actually offshooting just 70,000 years ago. So they are very new in terms of species. But in any case, they were a civilization of war. They started from the Mongolia and stuff like that. Celtic and Vikings, they were fighting, and they knew only one thing is fighting. It's even why they created the guns, because the only thing they knew is fighting. When they come now to us, to our ancestors, 1,000 years ago, they are amazed. They find people who have built civilization, agriculture, science, as Prof was putting it, Imhotep. They were fine realizations of human spirit, and they were amazed. We welcomed them. They learned, but now because they only knew how to fight, they started fighting us who had welcomed them. It's like you welcome someone in your own house, and that person now takes over your own house. Fortunately, we kicked them out, but the other came, the Greek came. They also stayed a bit with us, and we accommodated them at some point. But then, the Romans came and they fought between themselves, and that's how slowly we lost control. But that control, as Prof said it, that control, we'll regain it. We'll regain it 700 years later, with the more. We will go to Europe, and we will create the first ever university in Europe. The University of Salamanca is the first university in Europe, and it was created by the Africans. And that's how now civilization starts, spreading around Europe from Salamanca and the rest. All the Europeans start now seeing the value of cleanness, of intellectual life, etc., etc.
The age of enlightenment, Mr. Sam.
To cut it, sorry?
The age of enlightenment was introduced by them.
Exactly. So to cut it short, our civilization has been the longest. Theirs is the shortest, and as we see it today, it is dying, because it is founded on lies. That civilization is founded on lies. It's founded on materiality, and the material part of of reality is the smallest. The only way that civilization is standing is because of marketing. They know how to market even the lies, and they've made their ways of life attractive to us. They told us, if you want to be successful, you have to do ABCD. We are developed, you are underdeveloped. So for you to be developed, you have to be like us. So they have marketed their ways of being, but unfortunately, those ways of being, they are feeble. They are very very fragile. Actually, what Prof said about white supremacy is not actually white supremacy; it's white fragility, and that fragility is actually crumbling. And we are not giving this civilization another 100 years. It is completely dying, and we know that in about less than 30 years to come, Africa will be more than 60% of the whole world population. And I hope that we are going to bring in a new civilization based on Ma'at, based on Ubuntu, based on humanity. But we have to remember that we are dealing with crooks. We are dealing with people who have very crooked and wicked minds. And as Professor Achille Mbembe put it, we have to develop power. And we know it in the 18th dynasty, Thutmose III, the child of Queen Hatshepsut. He started ruling at 16, and he realized how wicked were the Euro-Asian, and he decided that now he's going to build power for Kemet. And that's what we have to do today. We have to start building power to make ourselves less invadable, if I can put it like that, to make ourselves, to kind of shield ourselves. We cannot keep on welcoming people who come and sit on our head and start doing nonsense on our heads. We have to develop power in such a way that we keep these invaders out of our reach, and also to ensure that we do our own things. Marcus Garvey said it, Africa for Africans. Malcolm X repeated it. We have to know that even if we have to cooperate at some point with the Euro-Asian, we have to do our own things. We can do business with them, and at the end of the day, we say, it was good doing business with you, but you go where you belong to, I stay where I belong to. No mix, because these people don't mean good for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sam. And before I let you go, I'm going to also ask you this other question. So what exactly then is the reason for the hassle over Africa? How special is Africa to the world?
Our ancestors called Africa Africa. And I like what Prof said earlier about the car, and this is not boasting or something, we know that we are the emanation. Our concept of the divinity is very different from what foreign religions have brought us. Our concept of the divinity of the greater one, who is Anu, and who is indescribable, who cannot be drawn, who cannot be, often we start from the Nun, as Prof put it, but before the Nun, there was Anu. And Anu is the great one, is the supreme. And our ancestors say that we are an emanation. We are not a creation. The foreign religion teach us about a God who created and some sort of demiurge. We don't have that concept of the divine. Our concept of the divine is the great one from whom we come. And the best way they put it is ejaculation. Just, when you have your child there, your child is, you didn't take like mold of earth and something, and you put breath on that thing to become alive. No, your child came from your semens, you know, and by copulation, your child came out. So your child is a duplicate of yourself. And that's how our ancestors conceived us. We are an emanation. We are not a creation. We are an emanation of the divine. So we have the same power, the same potentials as the divine. We are small gods and goddesses. That very concept show us that if we go by that worldview, then the transformation we impact on this world is actually limitless. The transformation that we think of is limitless. Maybe you heard about thought and the rest. Maybe we talk about it another time. It's limitless. I think we have, as Prof put it again, as the Afukai, meaning the land of the origin, and the origin is Anu. So we are part of it. We are part of the great one. If we take that, because Africa, when we take, for instance, some of the publications like the book written by Budimbe about the invention of Africa, he talks about the name of Africa being given by the European to us, but it's not true. And talking about Leo Africanus, that Roman soldier who came to Africa, that is not true. The name Africa comes from our ancestors, meaning the land of the origin. So if we take that concept, we actually re-spiritualize ourselves. We have been despiritualized, and that despiritualization has weakened us. We have to get hold of ourselves again in order to get our power and transform our current reality to be as great as it was. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sam, for answering that question. Prof, I feel like you do have something to say regarding this same question about the importance of Africa to the world.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, sir. I'm asking, what do you have to say about the same question about the importance of Africa? How important is Africa, not only to itself, but to the world?
Okay. To come back, I want to be sincere to tell you that Africa is the life source to the world. So Africa is most important to the world. I'm going to explain that. When we look at what is happening today in Africa, we get to feel like we are the least. We get to feel like we are children of a lesser God. But we are not. When you listen to the explanations that I and Mr. Sam just gave, you get to understand something about Africa. The African people, with the way they believe and hold on to life, is completely different from what we experience around the world today. And it is this ideology and way of comprehension that permitted them to bring civilization to the world at the level they brought it. And like I said, the African civilization lasted, and like we will see, it rose and it has fallen. But wherever something begins, it will surely end there again. For over 400 years, 400 to 500 years today, the Caucasians have actually been at the forefront manipulating But the time for the rise of Africa is now. Why did I say it's now? Because of the awakening that is taking place. So if you want to find out about how important Africa is to Africans and to the world, I want to tell you that using the words I heard you on Tuesday, you said Africa, Akibulan. Yes, Akibulan, meaning that Africa is the source of humanity. And being the mother of humanity or source of humanity, you can't disconnect from mother. Anytime the embryo is cut, the umbilical cord is cut, there is lack of supply that leaves the mother to the embryo. For those of you who understand that a mother who is pregnant, carrying a baby in her womb, this baby actually feeds from the mother. This baby's umbilical cord is connected to the mother. And if you cut it, you might surely be ending the life of that child. That is practically what is happening even right now in the war. At times we want to blame the Europeans for sourcing out of Africa. They can't live without Africa. They can't truly exist without Africa. Why? Because Africa is the mother of humanity. They must always connect back to the source of life in order to live. And if you look at it, at times when we go physical, because like some said, the Western civilization is a civilization that is bipolar. It has separated spirituality from physicality, and as a result of that, they are more focused on physicality than spirituality. And because their civilization is built on materialism, that is the reason why it cannot last. It's going to fail. And so they have focused on taking the wrong things from Africa, their mother. They are focused on taking the material and struggling to destroy the spiritual. They brought a fake spirituality to Africa that actually creates separation, where God is somewhere and you have to pray to a God who is external. That is a repackaged spirituality, which is wrong, material inclined. God is not apart from you. God is not somewhere that you need to pray to him and he answers your prayer. And that is why most of the times they have come and taught our people today to pray to a God who is away, and they are praying and this God is never responding to their prayers. And you know what? Things are not moving well for them. We are praying, but we remain poor. Poor in the sense that we have forgotten what makes us actually prosperous. The prosperity of a people is not dependent on the material resources, but on the spirituality of their understanding of life. And so, like I was saying, the Europeans, the Asians, whosoever they might be, they all come from Africa. And so Africa remains the center of hope for the entire world. And so the important place that Africa holds begins from the fact that it is the source of humanity. And even though it has been painted as the dark continent, I don't know why the source of light can become the source of darkness. It will not change the fact that even though they call it that continent, they still run back to Africa to get minerals. They still come back to Africa for everything. And one thing has made most of our people so dull is the fact that they fail to see that they are the ones that are giving back to the Europeans. I see most of our brothers struggling to cross the seas to go live in Europe. When you cross the seas and live in Europe, you discover that you cut yourself off from life. For those of you who have been in Europe before, you will bet with me that when you live in Europe, it is like you are disconnected from true life. You experience artificiality. Everything is artificial. There is no originality to it. And those are the things that most of us we want, because we have been sold the wrong image. Like Sam said, they have used marketing to actually market their civilization, which is failing. They have sold the wrong image to the African people, where we now believe in the wrong things. And that is what is holding us from actually awakening, because Africa is a sleeping giant. Don't forget that. And if Africa is going to awaken, we must abandon those marketing strategies that have been developed and brought to us. We have been made to see ourselves as nobodies. But the strength of the African people, I will bring it back to you, lies in their spirituality. I don't care whether you think that might be, okay, if somebody will say, maybe he's saying that Christianity is not good, it's foreign religion, or Islamism is not good, it's foreign religion. As long as you call it religion, it is not what is needed. Spirituality is life. I'll repeat it again. Spirituality is life. Spirituality is not a religion. Religion is tradition. And tradition is dead. And so anything that is dead should not be accepted by the African people. I started by saying something that we come from the African people using our African language, because I will not want to use the word creator, I want to use the word noon. Noon is the universal source of life. Using the African analogy of ocean, the belief that life begins from the waters. That's an analogy, because to them, it is universal. And the belief, like Sam said, we are actually emanation, drops, let me use that word, drops out of the great ocean. And you bet with me and accept with me that a drop of water is not different in content from the drop from the entire sea or ocean. So even though the drop of water, what they call the car, the soul, as the English people put it, the soul, the car, even though it comes from the greater car, the noon, it is not separate from it, because it carries the same content. So it means that our ancestors see humans, human beings as we call them, as gods. And as I said earlier, what is going to make Africa the place where everybody is going to turn back to is when we revive these philosophies and concepts and we start living back with them. Where these people get the belief, these ancestors of ours, the belief that every human being is supposed to be the creator of his experiences. And you are not supposed to be subject to these experiences. Because today we have become subject to our experiences. You become a creator. And these creators brings you to a place where you become the inventor of what you want to see in life. Implying that for you to best live, you need to know who you are. And knowing who you are means that you need to get deep inside of you to connect to the great consciousness that abides in you, which is connected to the great noon, to the great car. And from there, you live. And if you live from that dimension, you become the creator of the experiences you want. You become the inventor. You become whatsoever you want to become. And that is what made them to be able to come with They developed principles that guided their lives. I know a lot of people thought and said the Mahat is a god. We call it a female god. Mahat, they use the symbol of a lady who holds the feathers, the same lady to the whom they see, if you are used to with the law, who holds the balance, because those are the laws. Some of the laws of Mahat are truth. Some of them are balance, order, all that is found in Mahat. Mahat is balance, order, harmony. Mahat is truth. The principle of truth. The fact that we have been made to believe in European languages more than African languages is one of the reasons why at times struggling to explain these things, some people take them wrongly. And they presented to us wrong ideologies in telling us that our ancestors believed in many gods. No, they believed in one. And they believed that every other human is a god. So we are gods, and it will be rather fortunate or unfortunate to some of you to learn that written in your Bible, you go to the Hebrew Bible in the Psalms, Psalms 86 verse 2 says, I have said you are gods, and all of you are the sons of the Most High. That is a direct emanation of Kemetic philosophy. That is a direct proclamation of Kemetic philosophy. And you come to the New Testament, Jesus Christ himself says, to them that the word came, they were called gods. And if you look at the word there is the word that is, if you go to ancient Kemetic philosophy, the word, which is the source of everything, is what they call the neta, or we call it nte, as it is called in ancient Kemetic language. Nte, or we call it neta. Neta is what we call today the word. And Christ Jesus says, to them that the word came, they were called gods. So if you are of the word, if you are of the nte, you are also a god. And it is from this background understanding that we are supposed to become inventors and creators. Why am I saying this? There is no difference between science and spirituality. Because true sciences comes from when a man is truly spiritual. Don't forget that. True sciences comes from true spirituality. When a man is truly spiritual, he is the greatest of scientists, which implies that you can bring to the world what has not been. You can give to the world great, great inventions. So we need to go back to that. If Africa needs to bring the world back to where it was before, we need to go back to the place where we do not separate spirituality from secularity. Like I'll repeat it, I'll keep repeating it. Our ancestors never believed and never separated their experiences. They never separated the spiritual experience from the secular experience because it is holistic. And it is this holistic dimension of our understanding of who we are that permits us to become the true mother of creation. And that is why I'm going to be asking each and every African listening to me to learn to go back to study who they are. Learn to know yourself. The last time I spoke, and I spoke about African problem is that of identity. The identity problem is what the African man is suffering today. Until you know who you are, you will never be able to become who you are supposed to be. And we have been deprived of our identity when we were depersonalized with the ideologies of the West. When they came with the ideas that they brought to us, presenting to us ideas that were not corresponding to who we are, we got to start living out of ourselves. Today, the African man has become materialistic because of the ideologies that were presented to them. And we need to abandon that path if we are going to make a difference. And so, it is simple. If you want to live big, you need to think big. But thinking big means that you need to start living from inside. You need to start living. Your experiences need to flow from inside to the outside. Meaning that it is supposed to be spiritual in everything you do. The identity of the African people is not in their physical body. It's not in the color of our skin. Our identity is hidden in the concepts we were built with. Today we talk of Ubuntu, but we don't practice Ubuntu, if you have noticed. So the African people lack identity, which they need to revive. And this identity is knowing yourself. Know yourself. When you know yourself, you are the greatest of scientists. That's the base that we need to find. And you see, for generations, we had lived this life out of order, but I think it is time to put it back in order. I am sure I answer your question, Blanche.
Yes, you have. Thank you very much, Prof, for that. We've barely 20 minutes to go. I don't know if anyone has a contribution just for 3 minutes before I ask the very last question to our panelists. If you have anything to say, Kennedy. Right. If no one has anything to say, I'm just going to go directly into this question. I want to start with you, Mr. Sam, so that I'll end up with Prof, and then he will give us a little expose regarding or about the United Africa for Economic Empowerment. And my question is, looking at building the future of Africa through recovering its history, what are those important factors of the past that can be of benefit in building Africa's future?
I think we have to get to the intelligence of ourselves. When I talk about intelligence of ourselves, it is a deep understanding of who we are, as Prof put it. And a deep understanding of who we are starts with understanding some of the concepts actually we developed, our ancestors developed. What was behind the theology that they developed? What was behind the philosophy that they developed? What was behind the model of society that they developed? I think that there is a true work and even austere, a rigorous work we have to do. There is no shortcut to this thing. We, as Africans, we have to put ourselves seriously to work. I like what Chekanda Diop said, and he was addressing the youth. He said, young people, imbibe yourself with science. And I talk, when I talk about science here, I'm talking about scientere, you know, the process of knowing, you know, the rigor around knowing, not scientere, science as what we've been served by, you know, by Western science. I'm talking about a real process of hermeneutics of discovery, of interpretation of what our ancestors have left us as a heritage. And as Prof put it again, we are so lucky as a people because these things are graved on rocks. They cannot disappear. They are there, they are alive. And again, Cheikh Anta Diop said that for us, Kemet, ancient Egypt should be for us like ancient Greek was for the Europeans. For the European, ancient Greek was a frame of reference for everything they did later on. Science, technology, and everything. They cannot do science without talking about Pythagoras. They cannot do science without talking about Socrates. They cannot do science without talking about Aristotle. They cannot do science without talking about Plato and the rest. So we also, African culture at some point has diverted from its main center. And for us to go back to that center, we have to go to the rigor of studying and interpreting our ancient texts. And there are so many, from the pyramid texts to all the literature, what they call today the Book of the Dead, which is the book of coming forth to light. And there are also texts like the 14 principle of the Ma'at, the Declaration of Virtue, the Declaration of Innocence. All those things, we have plenty of literature that puts us, back to knowing who we really are as a people. And once we've done that, I think we start putting true foundation of real, not just a discovery, but building ourselves back, really building ourselves back to what we were. So that's what I'll say as a conclusion, Blandine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sam, for that. And I'm going to throw the same question at you, Professor. What are those important factors of the past that can help build the future of Africa? And I also want you, as usual, link your answer to the vision and mission of United Africa for Economic Empowerment.
I am certain that I already answered that question by saying that which we need to link to, which we need to connect ourselves to, is not the history per se, which is the dead part. It is supposed to be the living part, which had been written and engraved on stones, which are the concepts and principles that made our ancestors who they became. That is what we need to get from them. And getting these concepts and principles actually defines the very foundation of who we are. And I remember before I ended the last question you asked, I said Africans lost their identity. And the identity of the African people is not something that can be gotten by just following through with what we see today. No. To get the identity, we need to abandon what has been presented to us as who we are. For a very long period of time, let's say for over 400 years today, the African people have been given a wrong identity. We have been depersonalized. We have been completely humiliated. You cannot imagine that when I'm looking at Kennedy, I'm not seeing any name that is coming from Africa. I can give you his three names: Kennedy, Miller, Lord. None of them resembles African. And that's to make you understand that his identity was stolen from him. That's to make you understand his culture was stolen from me. They called me Mark Anthony. That is not my name. That's not what makes us Africans. That is a wrong identity of us, because a man's language and name has a lot to do with his culture and foundation. And so we were depersonalized. We were taken out of what we were. Today, I am struggling to speak some words from the ancient Kemetic language. It seems as if I am doing, what should I call? I am struggling to use strange languages. Some people will say I am using I don't know. I'm struggling to use a word that they have to actually identify what they might consider. When I talk of car, mahat, when we talk of the noon and all that, so people start looking at us wrongly because their language has been abandoned. They don't speak Africa, they speak Europe. We are speaking Europe right now as we are talking. We are speaking English. This has nothing to do with Africa. And these are the things that actually depersonalize us, stole away our identity. And so we need to go back to get what belongs to us. So even if you are going to be learning those things using the English language, the French language, or whatever language that you use in learning, which the colonizers brought to you, it is okay to use it to learn who you are. By the time we get to know who we are, we will know what to do in order to fix the problem we have now. So what the African people need to get from their ancestors is to go back to the concepts, go back to the ideologies, go back to the philosophies that guided their comprehension. When we get to grasp that, then we'll be redefining ourselves and reshaping the future to become what we expect that should become. I believe that Africa is going to be great again. And the greatness of Africa is not going to be broken down by anything. When all of Africans get to know that they are gods and they are contributors to the evolvement of the world, then Africa will be defining a new path for the world. So I'm calling on every African on this platform to end the discussion here because I think that I have less time. If we are going to make that difference to establish what we want, make Africa that great continent again, give Africa the place of honor, make the world to realize that Africa has always been the mother of the world, then it is time for every young African to start the process of relearning. We need to go back to start relearning because without that relearning, we will become failures. We will end up with nothing. So I want to invite each and everyone that has partaken in this program. If you are here and you had not registered as a member of this organization, United Africa for Economic Empowerment, we invite you to join, to go to our website, www.pafremo.org, and actually enlist yourself as a member officially. And once you do that, you can actually choose to become a member of one of the committees that we are having, because we would like to have every person from every walk of life that you are to work under a particular committee. We need active Africans to make sure that we reach our goal of empowering Africa again. We need to educate Africans, and we need every one of us. We need to re-engineer Africa, and we need every one of us. So one of the ways to do that, as I said, you go enlist yourself. Once you are in, then you get to know a lot. Our organization is an African organization, though we have representative body in the diaspora, but we are an African organization. And we want to see that this organization do not only end with talking, we also want to get fully involved with acting. I believe that our ancestors developed a lot of sciences and transformed normal agriculture into a different style, where they develop irrigation methods. They actually develop science on how to use animals to work their farms. That's an age-old principle that had been used in Africa before, in fact, in the BCs, before Christ ever was born. And I think that we in Africa today, we had abandoned a major part of us, and we are struggling right now in this organization to reindustrialize agriculture, which is what we have, and that which is what we believe in. We must reindustrialize it. And that's why in this organization, we are running farms. As one of the projects of the organization, we have farms that we want to open all over Africa in about, let's say, in almost all sub-Saharan Africans that we can reach there. We want to open farms there. We've already started in Cameroon. We will soon be moving to other nations, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana. We're moving across Africa because we want to see into it that we reach our goals. And so we also run cultural projects where we make sure we show the African people what their culture is like. And that's one of the projects. In December, we are running one in Cameroon, which will be represented by African nations here in Cameroon. So we are inviting you to be part and parcel of the organization because there is much to get from it. And apart from that, we have a lot to give. We're encouraging young entrepreneurs and want to see into it that a lot of young people get to become economically independent, not entrepreneurs who are managing to live, no, entrepreneurs who are creators. I define entrepreneurship differently from what some people think that when you get involved in a particular business, you're an entrepreneur. I was speaking here about the holistic nature of the African way of thinking, which is both spiritual, which is spiritual and material at the same time, is holistic, which to me, if you want to be an entrepreneur is somebody who is creative, who brings out of the wells of the conscious spirit in him new ideas and implement them. That is what entrepreneurship means to me. And that's what we are encouraging in this organization. We're establishing entrepreneurs, we are empowering entrepreneurs, and we want to make sure that this organization struggles to guide our leadership in various countries politically so that they can get to define the right principles and policies that will help our nations. So if you're working with us, if you are here with us, we want you to go to the website and list yourself. Okay, I think either Blandine or Kennedy is going to write it out for you to see if you have never seen the website. You participate in it. Okay, I will be sincere to say that this program to me seems to be so rich that I think we should go a bit in talking about African spirituality in our next discussions. We need to work in talking about African spirituality because a lot of people do not know what African spirituality is all about. And some people get to ask questions because they do not understand. You see, uh, some of us we misquote spirituality for religion, and we have been holding these principles for long, not knowing what they actually mean. So we are going to be looking into that in the near future. I'm sure in that by next Tuesday we should be bringing in on the platform Bishop Joshua Maponga the third. We should be bringing him. I think he is the guy who runs Sankora. We should be bringing him on board on Tuesday next week. So we are inviting everyone to be part and parcel of that program. I'm already announcing here that our Saturday program is going to be a general program where we'll be discussing generally. We are not going to be hosting any particular panelist. Everybody will be a panelist that day. So you have your voice to share on Saturday. Bring your ideas and give them. We're waiting for you in that program, Saturday. Thank you very much, Blantin. I'm sure that I have given my bit.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. And it's at this point that we're going to say a wonderful thank you to everyone that has participated. Thank you so much, Mrs. Sam, for being part of the show. Thank you, Professor, for being part of the show. Thank you to everyone that has taken time out, to participate in today's show. And we're hoping that as we go on, we're going to come up with more and more ideas and more knowledge, you know, to empower the Africans to rise up again and take over, you know, the continent for the betterment of the Africans. So yeah, I'm just going to say good night to everyone. And
Good night, everyone. Good night, Professor. Good night, Raymond. Good night, Blandine. Good night, Sam. Good night, Khalees. Good night, everybody. Excellent. Excellent.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste. Very, very passionate discussions. All of what I heard, I enjoyed.
Thank God.
Bye, Blandine.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
bye, Mr.
All right,
Sam.
everybody.